I signed the shelter intake log, feeling invisible. A gravelly voice cut through the silence behind me. My granddaughter will not sleep here another night. The next morning, the mayor's phone rang. My grandfather said only 7 words. Emerson's clause was activated. Immediately, by noon, the city of Grey Haven was paralyzed. Charity housing projects were frozen, permits revoked, and my name was the one being whispered in closed-door meetings. My name is Avery Flores. I am 28 years old and hold a master's degree in architecture from one of the best schools in the country. My thesis on sustainable urban density won a minor award. I once had a bright, clean apartment with a view of the river, a job at a prestigious firm, and a future that felt solid, like reinforced concrete. Now I was standing under a flickering fluorescent light that buzzed with a sound like a dying insect, smelling the ammonia-laced disinfectant that failed to mask the underlying scent of stale sweat and old soup. This was Shelter Haven 12, and I was about to sign away the last piece of my dignity for a cot in a room with 40 other people. It all unraveled in 6 weeks. 6 weeks since I'd been a rising star at Arcline Urban Works, the biggest, most connected development corporation in Grey Haven. I was junior lead on the Crestview project, a low-income housing initiative that was supposed to be the company's philanthropic crown jewel. I believed in it. I stayed late. I triple-checked blueprints. I fought for better ventilation systems. And that's when I found it. It wasn't a typo. It was a pattern. A systemic cost inflation, as the polite email from accounting called it. I called it theft. The project was billing the city for premium fire retardant materials, but the procurement orders I cross-referenced were for the cheapest, barely legal particle board. The discrepancy was 43%. 43% of the safety budget vanishing into a subcontractor's pocket. I did what I was supposed to do. I documented everything. I put the spreadsheets side by side. I wrote a concise, professional, internal memo to my direct supervisor, flagging the issue as an urgent safety and budgetary concern. I felt virtuous. I felt like the architect I was trained to be, the kind who protects the public. I even mentioned it to Damon, my boyfriend of 2 years. I told him over dinner, proud of my diligence. He seemed distracted, tapping his phone under the table. 3 days later, I was called into human resources. My supervisor wasn't there. It was just the VP of HR and a man from legal I didn't recognize. My memo was on the table. Beside it was another email chain, one I hadn't seen. It was from Damon forwarding my entire memo, all my spreadsheets, all my private concerns directly to the COO. Damon's email, which was projected onto the wall for effect, read, as discussed, Avery has been compiling this. I feel it is my duty to bring her disruptive and accusatory behavior to your attention. I remain, as always, fully committed to the Arcline team. They didn't call it a firing. They called it a contract termination pending internal investigation. An investigation, they said, into my unprofessional conduct and potential breach of corporate data integrity. I was escorted out by security, my work laptop confiscated, my portfolio locked on their server. The betrayal was so clean, so absolute. It left me breathless. Damon got the promotion. I saw it on LinkedIn a week later, junior project manager. The dominoes fell fast, as if they were designed to. The very next day, my corporate bank card, the one tied to my direct deposit, was declined at the grocery store. I called the bank. A polite voice informed me my accounts were frozen, flagged by an internal corporate query from Arcline Urban Works. They were investigating me. They claimed financial malfeasance. I had exactly $212 in cash in my wallet. My rent was due. I called my landlord, the same man who had praised my quiet, professional tenancy just a month before. I explained the situation, that my pay was unfairly withheld and that I would be late. He was all sympathy until I said the words, Arcline Urban Works. His tone changed. He told me he had a long-standing relationship with Arcline's property division. He couldn't afford to be mixed up in my employment dispute. The eviction notice was taped to my door less than 24 hours later. It gave me 3 days to vacate. I sold my laptop for cash. I left my furniture, my books, my degree framed on the wall. I packed a duffel bag and a backpack. I stayed with a college friend for 2 weeks, but her roommate threatened to call the landlord. I spent 4 nights in my car, until it was towed for being parked in the same spot for more than 72 hours. The impound fee was more than the car was worth. And so I walked. I walked 3 miles to the only place left, Shelter Haven 12. The building itself was an insult to my profession. A brutalist concrete box from the 70s, patched with mismatched siding. A large, garish sign out front read, A Haven for Grey Haven, proudly sponsored by the City Fund and Arcline Urban Works. The irony was so bitter it felt like acid in my throat. Arcline was funding the very place I was forced to flee to after they destroyed my life for pointing out their fraud. The intake room was grim. The rules were posted on a stained yellow poster, 10 p.m. lights out, no exceptions. 1 bag per person, searchable at any time. Mandatory attendance at career counseling sessions, which I later learned were run by an unpaid intern. This place was city-sponsored, but the cold that radiated from the concrete walls was deep and damp. I asked the intake clerk where the hot water was for the showers. She didn't look up from her magazine. Boilers intermittent. Be grateful for water at all. My architects I couldn't turn off. I saw the black mold spider webbing in the corner of the ceiling. I saw the fire alarm box by the door. Its glass casing was cracked, and the small indicator light was dark. It was dead. A non-functional fire alarm in a building funded by a company that was saving money by installing cheap, flammable materials in another housing project. It wasn't just negligence, it was a signature. A security guard, an older man with tired eyes, watched me studying the alarm. He ambled over, not threateningly, just wearily. He saw my gaze linger on the locked door marked Records Maintenance. He leaned in, his voice a low rumble. Don't ask questions, girl. I looked at him, confused. You look smart. That's dangerous here, he said, his eyes flicking toward the clerk. Don't ask about the boiler. Don't look at the file room. Don't ask why the food deliveries are always short. Just get your cot, keep your head down, and get out. I nodded. The cold fear returning. This wasn't just a shelter, it was a component in the same corrupt machine. The clerk shoved a clipboard at me. Sign here. Full legal name. I picked up the cheap blue pen, chained to the desk by a dirty string. I put the tip to the paper, Avery Flores. This was it. The absolute bottom, the moment my former life officially ended. As my pen formed the S in Flores, the heavy front door opened, letting in a blast of cold, wet air. It also let in a man who did not belong. He was tall, thin, and wore a dark wool overcoat that probably cost more than my entire year's salary at Arcline. His silver hair was perfectly combed. His face was a roadmap of intelligent, severe lines. He was Arthur Keaton, my grandfather. I hadn't seen him in 5 years, not since my mother's disastrous birthday dinner, where I had, in a fit of youthful idealism, called his entire life's work vulture capitalism, and stormed out. He was old money, old power. The Keaton family had practically built Grey Haven in the 19th century, and he had spent his life leveraging that legacy. We were estranged, deeply, fundamentally estranged. He didn't look at me. He didn't rush to embrace his destitute granddaughter. There was no, "Oh, Avery, my poor child." His eyes, a sharp, icy blue, scanned the room with a look of profound, calculated distaste. He walked directly to the intake desk. The clerk, who had been slouched in her chair, sat bolt upright. "May I help you?" she stammered, intimidated by the sheer aura of his wealth. "You may," he said. His voice was low and gravelly. He pointed a leather-gloved finger at the open logbook at my signature. "I'll need a photograph of that page." "Sir, that's confidential," the clerk began. Arthur Keaton didn't raise his voice. He simply held her gaze. "I assure you, what happens next will be far more complicated for you if you refuse." She shrank back. He pulled a slim, modern smartphone from his coat, angled it perfectly, and took a picture of the log. The click of the camera shutter was obscenely loud in the quiet room. Then he turned, not to me, but to the cracked fire alarm box I had been staring at. He took a picture of that, too, and of the mold on the ceiling. He put the phone back in his pocket and dialed a number. He didn't wait for a greeting. "Mayor Vance," he stated. It wasn't a question. He didn't wait for a greeting. "Mayor Vance," he stated. It wasn't a question. He listened for a second, his face impassive. "Arthur Keaton. I am standing in Shelter Haven 12. I have just watched my granddaughter sign your intake log because the firm you champion has blacklisted her. You have 30 seconds. He listened again. I could hear the faint, panicked squawking from the phone. "No, Dolores, I am not interested in your apologies." He cut her off. "I am invoking the Emerson clause immediately." He paused. The silence in the room was absolute. Even the buzzing light seemed to hold its breath. "Yes, that clause," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "Check the city charter. Section 4, Addendum B. The one your predecessor signed with me 20 years ago. You have 72 hours. I expect the auditors at dawn." He hung up. He didn't look pleased. He just looked focused. I finally found my voice. It came out as a broken whisper. "You've been watching me." The shame was overwhelming. Had he been watching me fail, watching me lose my job, my apartment, my car? He turned to me, and for the first time, his gaze softened, but only fractionally. It was not sympathy. It was assessment. "No, Avery," he said, his voice still firm. "I haven't been watching you, but I have been watching Grey Haven, and I have especially been watching Arcline Urban Works." "The Emerson clause?" I asked, my mind struggling to catch up. "An old piece of paper," he said, gesturing to the door. "But paper with teeth. 20 years ago, I donated the land for 3 of this city's shelters to fulfill a social housing mandate. This land, this very concrete box, sits on land that was once owned by my mother, Emerson Keaton. I put a condition in the transfer deed, a covenant." He stepped closer, lowering his voice, though he seemed unconcerned with the shell-shocked clerk or the listening guard. "The clause states," he continued, "that if any facility on that donated land, which receives Keaton Trust funds, or city funds in our name, is found to be operating in a manner indicative of gross negligence, or, more importantly, group interest malfeasance, the city is required, not requested, but required, to initiate a full independent special audit within 72 hours. He tapped his temple. "Few people are left in the city government who even remember it's still valid. Your signature in this book, in this building, after being fired by that company, is the trigger." He looked at me, the architect, the one who saw the details. "I can force the audit. Avery, I can open the door, but I am an outsider. They will stonewall me. They will bury my auditors and paperwork. They need someone who has been inside. Someone who knows what a fraudulent fire system looks like. Someone who knows Arcline's playbook." He motioned to the door. My car is outside. Leave this place tonight. He offered me his arm, a formal, old-world gesture that felt completely alien. Tomorrow, he said, his voice flat, but carrying an undeniable weight of promise. We open a box. I left the shelter in Arthur's gleaming, silent car. It was a vintage Bentley, and it moved through the pre-dawn streets of Greyhaven with the silent, heavy assurance of old money. We didn't drive to one of his sprawling estates. We went to the top floor of the oldest bank building in the city, a granite tower that still bore the Keaton family crest carved above the main entrance. The brass plaque on the mahogany door was discreet, reading only Keaton Civic Trust. Inside was a wood-paneled library, a place that smelled of old leather, floor wax, and the dry, crisp scent of old paper. It was just after 3 a.m. A sharp woman in a perfectly tailored suit, whom he introduced as Maria, his chief counsel, was already there. Beside her stood two severe-looking men, who were unmistakably forensic accountants. They had the pale, intense look of men who found poetry in balance sheets. Arthur didn't offer me coffee or comfort. He unrolled a heavy, cream-colored document across the massive desk. The paper was thick. The ink, faded but legible. The Emerson clause, he stated. Maria stepped forward, her voice as precise as her suit. 20 years ago, Mr. Keaton donated the land for 3 of the city's primary shelters to fulfill a social housing mandate. Haven 12 is one of them. The city was desperate for the land to meet federal grant deadlines. Arthur insisted on this provision, named for his mother. It's a covenant, not a suggestion. She tapped a paragraph. It stipulates that if any facility on that donated land, which receives city or Keaton Trust funds, is found to be operating in a manner indicative of gross negligence, or, and this is the key phrase, group interest malfeasance, the trust has the right to demand a special, binding audit. The city has exactly 72 hours to comply, or they forfeit the land. It reverts entirely to the trust. The mayor is aware of this. The city attorney has already confirmed its validity. Arthur looked at me, his icy blue eyes assessing. Mayor Vance is complying. She has to. Her auditors will arrive at Haven 12 at 8 a.m. They will be utterly useless. Why? I asked, my voice still raspy from the shelter's damp air. Because they are city employees, he said flatly, as if explaining gravity. They will be steered toward the kitchen sanitation logs and the thread count of the bed sheets. They will find a few minor infractions, write a report that recommends further study, and the city council will bury it. Arcline will continue its business. He folded his hands on the desk. I activated the audit, Avery, but you are the one who must aim it. They see me as an old relic. They see you as a disgruntled employee. They don't yet see you as the weapon. You know their systems. You know their lies. You were inside. What did you see? The professional part of my mind, the architect, snapped back into focus, pushing the shame and the cold aside. At Crestview, the project I was fired from, they were systematically inflating costs. I flagged it. That's why Damon sold me out. How? One of the accountants, Harris, asked, his pen already poised. The specifications, they billed the city for premium, 3-hour rated fire-resistant drywall, but the procurement orders were for standard 60-minute board. They billed for shielded plenum-rated communications cable, but installed cheap PVC jacketed wire. The invoices sent to the city matched the high-grade budget, but the purchase orders sent to the suppliers matched the cheap materials. The discrepancy was 43%. 43% vanished. I stopped. The connection hit me with the force of a physical blow. Haven 12. The fire alarm box by the door. It was dead. The glass was cracked. The indicator light was off. The security guard. He warned me not to look at the maintenance records. Who was the subcontractor for the fire suppression system at Crestview? Arthur asked, his voice low. Northline Civic Partners, I said. Arthur looked at Maria. She was already typing on her laptop, her face illuminated by the screen in the dark room. Northline Civic Partners, she read aloud, her voice devoid of surprise. They have received every major maintenance and repair contract for Haven 12 for the last 8 years. They also have the exclusive contract for the new ventilation system at the City Hall Annex. They are, for all legal purposes, a shell. Their vice president is the brother-in-law of our client's chief operating officer. They are using the exact same playbook, I said, standing up, the adrenaline surging. They aren't just defrauding new construction projects. They are defrauding the maintenance of the old ones. They are billing the city for repairs that never happen. They are installing substandard parts in shelters, in public buildings. The mold I had seen spiderwebbing across the shelter ceiling flashed in my mind. I did zoning research for Crestview. I saw public health records for that district. There's a documented spike in respiratory illnesses in the blocks immediately surrounding Haven 12. It's the mold. The ventilation system is probably just as fraudulent as the fire alarms. I looked at Arthur. I still have the data. They seized my work laptop. But they didn't know I backed up the entire Crestview analysis to a private cloud drive. The spreadsheets, the invoices, the 43%, it's all there. Arthur nodded, a single decisive movement. Harris, you and your team are now attached to the city's audit, authorized by the trust. Ms. Flores, he said, turning to me. And for the first time, he called me by my professional name. You are now a technical consultant for the Caton Civic Trust. You will go with them. You will show them where the bodies are buried. By 10 a.m., the city was vibrating. Mayor Dolores Vance, her face pale and pinched, held an emergency press conference. She announced a temporary and immediate freeze on all outstanding payments to Northline Civic Partners, pending a full procedural review. The questions from the press were sharp and hostile. She kept repeating the phrase procedural review, her voice tight. I knew what that meant. She was being squeezed. The City Council, funded heavily by our client's various political action committees, would be furious. She was stalling. Caught between the legal teeth of the Emerson clause and the political teeth of her backers, the city auditors were, as Arthur had predicted, completely useless. They were intimidated by the Haven 12 staff, who were clearly under orders to obstruct. They were led to a freshly painted, clean room and told it was representative of the whole building. But Harris and his team, backed by the legal authority of the Caton Trust, were not. We didn't start in the office. I led them straight to the basement boiler room. It was damp and smelled of rust and decay. I pointed to the maintenance logs, chained to a thick pipe. Check the dates, I told Harris. He read them aloud. Boiler serviced. October 5th. Filter system replaced. September 20th. I ran my gloved finger over the main filter housing. It came away black with thick, greasy soot. That housing bolt is rusted shut, I said. It hasn't been opened in at least a year. Those are phantom repairs. We demanded access to the maintenance archive, the locked records maintenance room the guard had warned me about. The shelter manager, a hostile man named Clark, stalled for 3 hours. He claimed the key was lost, then that it was with an off-site supervisor. Maria simply produced a court order, signed by a sympathetic judge, at 7 a.m., compelling immediate access. The door was opened. It was a nightmare of damp boxes and sagging shelves. We scanned documents for 12 hours straight. My eyes burned, but my architectural training took over. I wasn't just looking for numbers. I was looking for patterns, for the language of the fraud. At 2 a.m., I found it. A stack of invoices from Northline cross-referenced with the city's payment authorizations. Here, I whispered to Harris, my hand shaking slightly. Fire system wiring. They built the city for 6,000 feet of Type A shielded fire alarm cable. That's premium, top of the line, essential for a building this old to prevent signal decay. And the purchase order? Harris asked, his voice quickening. I dug deeper into a corresponding box. Here, I said, holding up the PO. They bought 6,000 feet of Type C unshielded cable. It's the cheapest stuff on the market, barely rated for a single-family home, let alone a high-occupancy shelter. It would melt in seconds. It would burn up before the signal ever reached the alarm panel. That's the fraud, Harris said, his voice grim. It's worse, I said, pulling my own Crestview files up on my tablet. It's a carbon copy. It's their entire business model. Bill for Type A, install Type C. I needed more. The invoices were the skeleton, but I needed the flesh. I needed to prove intent. I still had my duffel bag from the shelter, which Arthur's driver had retrieved from the Bentley's trunk. I went back to Haven 12 the next day, using the excuse that I needed to retrieve my personal items. The warehouse and inventory manager, a guy named S, was overseeing a delivery. I recognized him from Arcline. He'd been transferred here 6 months ago. He was arrogant, lazy, and sloppy. I turned on the voice recorder on my phone, shoved it deep in my jacket pocket, and approached him, affecting a defeated slump. S, it's Avery Flores from Arcline, I said. He sneered, shifting a clipboard. Heard you crashed and burned. Flores slumming it. Just grabbing my stuff, I mumbled. Hey, I'm trying to clear my name. The Crestview files. They are burying me. You remember those fire cable invoices? The ones from Northline. He looked around, suddenly nervous. I don't know what you're talking about. Come on, S, I pressed, playing the desperate card. They hung me out to dry. I'm just trying to figure out their filing system. The city auditors are looking at the red file, right? But the black file was the one we used for payment, wasn't it? I was bluffing, using terms I'd heard in old corporate thrillers. He laughed, a short, barking sound. He thought I was stupid. He thought I was beaten. You're even dumber than I thought, Flores. Yeah? The red file is for the housing committee. That's the official record, the pretty one. The black file is for the real payment. That's just inventory management. He waved a dismissive hand. Look, I don't know anything about it. I just moved the boxes they tell me to move. I backed away slowly. Thanks, S. You've been a big help. I had it. The admission. Red file for the housing committee. Black file for the real payment. I brought the recording to the trust's office. We were compiling the package, the invoices, the purchase orders, the recording, and my original Crestview data. We had a narrative. We had the proof. And then Arcline hit back. It was late on the third day, the 72-hour audit window just closing. My phone buzzed with a news notification from the Greyhaven Gazette's website. The headline was a gut punch. Disgruntled ex-employee or fake whistleblower, the curious case of Avery Flores. My stomach dropped. I clicked the link. There, splashed across the front page, was a photograph. It wasn't a professional headshot. It was grainy, high angle, and utterly humiliating. It was clearly taken by a security camera. It was me, asleep at Shelter Haven 12. I was on a narrow cot, my hair greasy and matted, my jacket bunched up as a pillow, my mouth half open in exhausted sleep. I looked broken, defeated, pathetic. The article, written by a journalist known for fawning pieces on Arcline's corporate charity, painted a damning picture. It detailed my abrupt termination from Arcline for performance issues and financial irregularities. It mentioned my eviction and then used the photo as its central exhibit. The implication was viciously clear. I wasn't a noble whistleblower. I was a failed architect, a charity case, a broken homeless woman living in a shelter. The story spun my presence there not as the result of Arcline's corruption, but as the motive for my fabricated claims. I was lashing out, the article suggested, because I was broke, angry, and jealous of my ex-boyfriend's success. My credibility, the very foundation of our case, was shattered. The public comment section exploded. She's just trying to get a payout. A spoiled rich kid who couldn't hack it. Fake news from a bitter woman. I felt the blood drain from my face. This was it. They had won. They had taken my lowest, most vulnerable moment, weaponized it, and executed me in the public square. I looked up at Arthur. He had read the article over my shoulder. His face was an impassive mask of granite. I waited for the pity. Though I told you so. He simply straightened his tie. Good, he said. Good, I choked out, the word catching in my throat. Arthur, they've destroyed me. No one will believe a word I say now. It's not good, Avery. It is precise, he said, turning to his chief counsel. Maria, this is not the move of a confident opponent. This is the move of a panicked one. They've just confirmed publicly that we have them worried. He looked back at the humiliating photo of me sleeping. This means they are paying attention, he said, and for the first time I saw a cold, thin fire in his eyes. They are right on schedule, and they will make another mistake. The fallout from the Grey Haven Gazette article was immediate. Arthur was right. It was a move of desperation, but it still cut deeply and precisely, just as they intended. The first call I received was not from a lawyer, but from my mother. Evelyn Flores Keaton lived in a state of carefully curated denial. She had taken the Keaton name, but rejected the Keaton legacy, preferring the quiet, insulated life of the suburbs, funded by a trust that Arthur managed, and she pretended not to need. Avery, what in God's name are you doing? Her voice was thin, vibrating with social panic. She wasn't worried about my safety, she was worried about her bridge club. Hello, Mother. I just got off the phone with Judith Price. Her husband is on the Arcline board. They saw the Gazette, Avery. A shelter. You're letting Arthur drag you into one of his crusades, and you are embarrassing this family. The accusation was so predictable, so perfectly aligned with her worldview, that it snapped my own fear into a cold, hard anger. Embarrassing, I said, my voice low. I slept there because a company your friend's husband sits on the board of fraudulently destroyed my career. I slept there, and the fire alarms do not work. The walls are filled with black mold. The boiler is rusted shut. That is what I am doing. That is not your concern, Avery, she insisted. That is what the city has commissions for. Your job was to be a professional architect. You had a wonderful position. You threw it all away over some paperwork, and now you're making a public spectacle. You're letting them take pictures of you like that. They took that picture without my permission. Mom, it doesn't matter. She snapped. You gave them the opportunity. You are making us look unstable. Please, Avery, apologize to those people at Arcline. Call Arthur and tell him to stop. This is not our fight. I finally understood. For my mother, the systems of power were like the weather. You didn't fight them, you just dressed appropriately and hoped you didn't get wet. The idea that someone would stand in the rain and call it what it was, a storm, was appalling to her. I can't do that, Mom, I said, the line feeling very final. I am choosing to protect the safety of the people in that building. Someone has to. I hung up before she could reply. The chasm between us, which had been widening for years, now felt like a canyon. The second contact was, in some ways worse, a text message from a number I had deleted but not forgotten. Damon, I need to see you. Please, Avery, I can explain. Coffee shop, 10 minutes. I'm already here. I shouldn't have gone, but I had to see the face of my own catastrophic failure in judgment. He was sitting in a corner booth, hunched over a cup, his knuckles white. The expensive suit he wore, the one I had helped him pick out, looked rumpled, as if he'd slept in it. He looked haunted. You look terrible, Damon, I said, not sitting. He flinched. Avery, thank you for coming. God, what they did to you. The article. I never wanted this. What did you want, Damon? Just the promotion, or was destroying me part of the package? His eyes, which I had once found so charming and sincere, were slick with desperation. He admitted it all, the words tumbling out in a pathetic rush. They promised me the Crestview project, the whole thing. Project manager, they said you were being disruptive, that your memo was going to kill the funding. They said you were a Keaton, that you were arrogant, that you didn't need the job. They told me if I showed them loyalty, if I proved I was on the team, they would fast-track me past everyone. So, you forwarded the email, I said. It was a flat statement. I didn't know they would freeze your accounts, he pleaded, reaching for my hand. I pulled it back. I swear. I thought they'd just transfer you, maybe to the zoning department. I thought you'd be angry, but not this. Not homeless. Avery, we can fix this. Fix what? The fact that you sold me out, or the fact that the fire alarms are fake. He had the grace to look ashamed. He knew. He had seen the early specs. He knew about the cost-saving measures. He hadn't just betrayed me, he had betrayed the entire city. It's not too late, he whispered, leaning in. They are terrified of Arthur. They know he's activated the audit. They'll settle. They'll give you your job back. They'll clear your name. They might even give me a finder's fee. We can just go back. Walk away from this, please. I looked at him, at this weak, ambitious, terrified man. And I felt nothing but a cold emptiness. He wasn't offering me a solution, he was offering me a return to the lie. I told Arthur about the meeting later that day. I confessed the small, ugly part of me that had wanted, for just 1 second, to take the deal, to just make the noise stop. Arthur was standing by the window of the trust office, looking down at the city. He's offering you a truce because he's on the losing side, Arthur said, not turning. And you are tempted by forgiveness. Do not be. It's not about virtue. I asked. Forgiveness is a luxury, Avery. You forgive when the system is fixed. You forgive after the weak have a secure safety net. Not before. Forgiving him now, while the building is still a tinderbox, is not virtue. It is surrender. It is allowing the crime to stand. His words struck a deep chord. I thought back to my thesis defense, the event that had led me to Arcline in the first place, my dream project. It wasn't a skyscraper. It was the Greyhaven Community Library, a 3-story building of reclaimed brick, glass, and timber, designed to be a true public space with open-air reading rooms and a free technical workshop. A senior juror, a man named Michael Garrick, now the managing partner at Arcline's law firm, had smiled condescendingly. It's a beautiful design, Miss Flores, he'd said, to the nodding agreement of the other jurors. A lovely piece of public relations, but in the real world, we build assets that generate revenue. This is a PR project. I had joined Arcline to prove him wrong. To prove I could build in the real world, that I could bring good design to profitable projects. I had been a fool. I was just PR for them all along. Arthur's words stiffened my spine. I was not surrendering. The next day, I went back to Haven 12. This time, I went as a technical consultant for the Caton Trust, flanked by Harris, the auditor, and a newly hired, very large private security guard. We had a writ of inspection. I needed to connect the black mold to the respiratory illnesses. The residents, who had seen my photo in the paper, no longer viewed me as an outsider. I was the woman who had slept on cot B12. They trusted me. The cough, an older woman named Maria told me, holding a tissue to her mouth. Oh, honey, we call that the Haven hack. Everyone gets it within a week. It's in the air. I did a quick, informal survey. Of the 20 residents in the main common room, 12 of them reported a persistent, dry, hacking cough. 3 of them had asthma inhalers, which they said they'd only needed since moving in. I used a moisture meter on the drywall in 3 separate rooms. The meter shrieked. It's reading off the charts. I had Harris photograph me, as I used a utility knife to peel back a loose flap of vinyl wallpaper, by a bunk bed. Behind it was a sickening, velvety black bloom of stachybar trees. The black mold was thick, wet, and pulsing in the damp wall. The shelter manager, Clark, saw us. His face, already sallow, turned a blotchy red. He stormed over, getting so close I could smell the stale coffee on his breath. You're done, he hissed, jabbing a finger at me. The audit is over. You're trespassing. This is a private facility. This is a publicly funded facility on land governed by the Emerson Clause, I countered, my voice steady, though my heart was hammering. And this is evidence of gross criminal negligence. I'm warning you, he said, his eyes dark. You stay the hell away from the boiler room. You stay away from my equipment. Get out. Harris stepped between us, holding up the writ. We are within our rights. Mr. Clark, I suggest you step aside. Clark backed off, but his eyes promised retribution. You're making a big mistake, he spat before storming off. We returned to the trust. We had the invoices. We had the recording of S admitting to the red file and black file. We now had photographic evidence of the mold and resident testimony. It's enough, Harris said, rubbing his eyes. We can force the city to declare it a public health hazard, but Arcline will drag this out in civil court for years. They'll appeal. They'll blame the residents. They'll replace a few panels of drywall and call it fixed. It's not a kill shot. We are missing the mechanism, Arthur said, his gaze distant. The mechanism for immediate action, for accountability. He paused, tapping his fingers on the desk. Clark, the manager. My equipment, he said. He's territorial. Arthur suddenly looked at me, his eyes sharp. Did you ever see the original charter for the city's public works? The public archive. The public archive. No, I said. It's all digitized now. Not all of it, he said. He walked to a heavy steel safe hidden behind a painting of Grey Haven's founding. He spun the dial and opened it. From a velvet-lined drawer, he removed a key. It was heavy, iron, and ornate with a complex, strangely geared bit. A master utility key. When I signed the land transfer 20 years ago, the city attorney gave me this. It opens the old City Works archive in the sub-basement of City Hall. The place they keep the documents they've forgotten about. It was almost midnight when we arrived. The sub-basement smelled of dust, time, and drying ink. We found the original 1999 deed transfer, bound in heavy blue leather, tied with a faded red ribbon, and tucked into a sleeve in the back cover, folded and sealed with the Keaton family wax crest, was another document. It wasn't a copy, it was an original, signed by Arthur and the mayor at the time. Addendum K. Maria, Arthur's counsel, had joined us. She read the brittle paper under the beam of a flashlight. Her breath hitched. "Arthur, my God, what is it?" I asked. She read the crucial paragraph aloud. "In the event the special audit specified in the primary clause provides clear and compelling evidence of willful and intentional malfeasance, not mere negligence, but intent to defraud, the City of Greyhaven is mandated, not requested, but mandated, to convene a full public and binding City Council hearing within 48 hours of verification." My blood ran cold. Verification of what? "Of the intent," Arthur said, a grim, thin smile touching his lips. "The red file and black file recording the Type A cable build and Type C cable installed. That is intent." "It gets better," Maria said, her voice shaking with excitement. "It says here, if said intentional malfeasance is proven at the hearing by a simple majority vote, full possessory control of the land and all structures thereupon reverts temporarily to the Caton Civic Trust for a period of 90 days to oversee immediate remediation." It was a land reversal clause, a legal unicorn. Maria was already on the phone. She informed the city attorney's office that we were invoking Addendum K, and that our proof of intent was ready to be presented. The explosion was immediate. The mayor's chief of staff, a man named Davies, called Arthur's personal line, screaming. Arthur put him on speakerphone. "You don't understand, Keaton. You can't do this," Davies yelled. "The Haven 12 parcel isn't just a shelter. It is the legal and geographic anchor for the entire Phase 4 downtown redevelopment. It's the linchpin. If you tie up that parcel, if ownership reverts, even for a day, the entire bonded development plan collapses, the financing fails, you'll bankrupt the city. Then I suggest you convene the public hearing, Mr. Davies," Arthur said, his voice as cold and calm as a frozen lake. "And I suggest you do it quickly." He hung up. The emergency public hearing was scheduled for 2 days from now. The entire city's financial future was now tied to that single parcel of land. Arthur turned to me. The fight was no longer about invoices in a damp basement. It was about to become a public execution. "They will try to destroy you on that floor, Avery," he said. "They will use the photo. They will use Damon. They will use your mother's disapproval. They will paint you as an unstable, vengeful, broken woman." He placed a hand on my shoulder. The first time he had ever touched me with anything resembling comfort. "But you are not those things," he said. "You are an architect, and you are the only one who can explain to them, in simple, undeniable terms, what they have done." He motioned toward the window, to the lights of City Hall in the distance. "That hearing," he said, his voice a low, dangerous whisper, "will be your stage." We had less than 48 hours until the emergency hearing. The clock was ticking, not just on the city's finances, but on the lives of the people in Haven 12. The red file, black file recording proved intent to defraud, and the mold proved negligence. But to invoke the full, terrifying power of Addendum K, the land reversal clause, I had to prove the danger was not just theoretical. It had to be immediate, willful, and active. Arthur hired an independent structural engineer, a man named Ben Carter, who specialized in fire suppression systems. He was a gruff, no-nonsense man who looked like he'd spent his life in boiler rooms, which, it turned out, he had. We arrived at Haven 12 at 10 a.m. sharp, armed with the court order Maria had secured. The shelter manager, Clark, met us at the door, his face a mask of furious compliance. "Mr. Clark," Maria said, her voice crisp and formal. "This is Mr. Carter, a licensed engineer, and M.S. Flores, a technical consultant for the trust. They have a judicial writ to inspect the building's fire suppression and HVAC systems, all of them, starting with the main control room. The city auditors are already here, Clark snarled. We are trying to run a facility for vulnerable people. The first thing I noticed was the camera, a small black dome in the ceiling of the main technical hallway. Its tiny red indicator light was dark. The security cameras in this wing seem to be down, I said to Clark, loud enough for Maria and Carter to hear. Clark shrugged, a fake, dismissive gesture. They are being serviced. Scheduled maintenance. I pulled out my phone. I didn't believe him. I hit record and held it up, ostensibly to light the dim hallway, but I angled the lens to capture everything. Then you won't mind if I document our inspection for Mr. Carter's report, I said. Carter led the way to the main utility riser, a small concrete room in the sub-basement. It was the heart of the building's safety system. Carter shone a heavy flashlight on the main water intake pipe for the sprinklers. And there it was. My blood went cold. It wasn't just old. It wasn't just leaking. It was intentionally disabled. A heavy red metal tag, a lockout or tagout device, was zip-tied around the main shut-off valve. The valve was cranked to the closed position, and the tag hung from it, bearing a stark warning, danger, do not operate. System out of service. Carter let out a low whistle. This building has no water pressure to its sprinkler system, he said, his professional calm making the words sound even more terrifying. It's been manually shut down. I stepped closer, my phone's camera rolling, the light cutting through the gloom. I filmed the tag, the serial number on the valve, and the zip tie holding it in place. When was this tagged? I asked. Clark, who had been standing in the doorway, suddenly looked pale. That's for the city inspection. We had a leak. We had to shut it down temporarily. Temporarily. Carter grabbed the tag. The date on this is from 6 weeks ago. The authorization signature is illegible. This isn't a temporary fix, son. This is a deliberate shutdown. You've got a 3-story occupied building with no automated fire suppression. This is a criminal act. It's the same signature, I said, reviewing the footage on my phone and comparing it to the photos of the fraudulent maintenance logs we'd scanned. It matches the phantom repairs. They are not just billing for services they don't perform. They are actively disabling the existing functional systems to, what? Save on water pressure. Prevent a leak in a system they never bothered to maintain. I zoomed in on the valve itself, recording the manufacturer's name and the serial number. This is the original 1970s valve, I murmured. The invoices we have from Northline Civic Partners billed the city for a full system replacement. 2 years ago, we had them. We had the billing for a full replacement. We had the purchase orders for cheap, substandard wiring. And now we had physical proof that the original, ancient valve was still in place and had been intentionally tagged out, leaving the entire building and its occupants defenseless. Carter moved to the HVAC control unit, the source of the black mold. He attached a digital anemometer to the main air duct. The reading was almost 0. The fans aren't just running low, he said, shaking his head. They are not running at all. The intake vents are clogged with debris. This system has never, not once, met the minimum required air exchange rate for a facility of this size. They are just circulating the same spore-filled air over and over. We left the building an hour later, our silence heavier than the damp air. Clark watched us go from the front door, his face a picture of barely suppressed panic. We were walking to the car, parked 2 blocks away. Maria and Carter were ahead, discussing the legal phrasing of Carter's affidavit. I was a few steps behind, reviewing the video on my phone, when a truck pulled up beside me. It was an unmarked white utility van, the kind subcontractors use. A man leaned out of the passenger window. He was thick-necked and wore a stained Northline Civic Partners t-shirt. "You're Avery Flores," he said. It wasn't a question. I stopped. Who are you? I'm just a guy, he said, his eyes cold and flat. A guy who works for a living. A guy who's telling you to stop. Stop what? This? All this messing with the shelter. Messing with arc line. You're just an architect. You don't know what you're doing. You're messing with people's livelihoods. The people in that building don't have livelihoods, I shot back, my anger overriding my fear. They have COVID and they have a fire system that's been shut off. He laughed, a short, ugly sound. That's just paperwork. That's just business. You need to walk away. You're a smart girl. Don't destroy yourself over this. He reached out and shoved something at my chest. A thick white business envelope. It was heavy. What is this? A down payment on your future, he said. Take a vacation. Go back to school. Forget you ever heard of Haven 12. There's plenty more where that came from. Or don't. And find out what happens next. The van sped off, leaving a cloud of diesel exhaust. My hands were shaking. I looked down at the envelope. It was unsealed. I could feel the thick, crisp edges of cash inside. I didn't open it. I walked quickly to the car where Maria was waiting. Maria, I said, my voice tight. I need an evidence bag, a big one. I held the envelope out by its edges. A man from Northline just gave this to me. He told me to stop, and not to destroy myself. It's a bribe. Maria's eyes widened, then narrowed into slits. She pulled a large sealable plastic bag from her briefcase. We don't touch it. We don't count it. We log it, seal it, and hand it to the district attorney's office as evidence of witness tampering. The game had changed. They weren't just fighting back with PR anymore. They were scared enough to get sloppy. They were scared enough to commit another, more obvious crime. While I was being threatened in a parking lot, Arthur was in the mayor's office playing a much bigger game. He didn't bring lawyers. He just brought two things. The first was a copy of the city's liability insurance policy. The second was a single 8 by 10 photograph, a high-resolution, time-stamped image of the red danger tag on the Haven 12 shut-off valve. As Maria later recounted, he slid the photo across the mayor's desk. That, Arthur said, is the kill shot. Dolores Vance, who had been preparing for a fight over zoning and bonds, simply stared at it. Our engineer's report, Arthur continued, his voice calm, will be filed with the city clerk at 3 p.m. today. As of 3 p.m., the city of Grey Haven will be officially on notice that Haven 12 is a death trap, that you, your office, and the city council are aware of an immediate and willful violation of all state and federal fire codes. He leaned in. So, I want you to think about one word, Dolores, insurance. Vance's face went white. Think, Arthur pressed, about what happens when, not if, a fire breaks out in that tinderbox. Think about what happens when the city's insurance carrier sees this photo, and the affidavit from my engineer. They will deny the claim. They will state, correctly, that the city was operating with gross willful negligence. Every dollar of liability, every wrongful death lawsuit will not be paid by the insurance company. It will be paid by the taxpayers of Grey Haven. It will be paid from your budget. He let the silence hang in the room. You were worried about your redevelopment bond collapsing, Arthur said. I am offering you a choice. A messy public hearing that gives you political cover to fix this, or a career-ending, city-bankrupting firestorm right before an election. Which headline do you want, Dolores? Mayor Vance folded. She had no choice. The mayor folded. She had no choice. She personally fast-tracked the emergency public hearing. The 48-hour countdown was official. Arcline responded like a wounded animal. At 5 p.m., a press release hit every news wire. Arcline Urban Works vows to fight malicious smear campaign. The statement was a masterpiece of corporate deflection. It painted me as a disgruntled, unstable former employee. It painted Arthur as a relic of old money elitism, a failed tycoon trying to manipulate city development for his own gain. It mentioned the Caton Trust's vast untaxed land holdings. It was a classic us versus them narrative, positioning Arcline as the engine of progress and us as the saboteurs. The effect was immediate. Arcline's over-the-counter stock, which was thinly traded but heavily leveraged, wobbled. Investors started calling, and then came the name I had been dreading. Arcline's board announced they had retained outside counsel to vigorously defend their interests. The firm was Garrick and LOM, and the managing partner, who would be leading the defense, was Michael Garrick. The man who had dismissed my thesis, the man who had called my passion for community architecture a PR project. This wasn't just a legal battle anymore. This wasn't just a legal battle anymore. This was my thesis defense all over again. Only this time, the stakes weren't a grade, they were lives. I told Arthur, I know this man. He's going to attack me, not the data. He'll use the photo from the Gazette. He'll bring up Damon. He'll say I'm vindictive. Yes, he will, Arthur said without a trace of concern. And that is precisely what we want. He made a call. Within an hour, I was sitting with a new team of lawyers, not corporate lawyers, but sharks. They specialized in slap suits, strategic lawsuits against public participation. Mr. Garrick is walking into a trap, the lead lawyer, a woman named Chen, told me. He's going to stand up in a public, televised hearing and defame a registered, protected whistleblower. The moment he attacks your character, he triggers the anti-slap statute. We will not only have his testimony struck, we will countersue him, his firm, and Arcline for defamation and intimidation, and we will demand they pay all our legal fees. He thinks he's the predator. We are going to make him the prey. I felt a small, hard kernel of resolve form in my chest. I had the technical data. I had the legal shield. But Arcline had one last move. The night before the hearing, we were all in a conference room at the Trust doing a final run-through. My testimony was polished. The engineering report was printed. The financial audit was bound. At 11 p.m., Maria's phone buzzed. She looked at it, her brow furrowing. That's odd. I just got a breaking news alert. She read it aloud. Fire crews are responding to an alarm at Shelter Haven 12. Oh, wait, they are reporting it as a false alarm. I stood up. A false alarm? The alarm can't go off, I said, my mind racing. The system is tagged out. The wiring is cheap. It shouldn't be functional. Unless, Arthur said, his voice grim, unless someone was testing it. Unless someone manually triggered the bell, bypassing the main system just to see what the response time would be, or to create a paper trail to make it look like the system is working, just faulty, I finished. A boy who cried wolf defense. They are trying to muddy the waters. The call was a threat. It was a message, we know what you're doing, and we're still one step ahead. Arthur looked at me, his face impassive. They are reacting. They are sloppy. They just created another witness, the entire Grey Haven Fire Department. He straightened his suit jacket. It's time. Let's go to the hearing. The City Council chamber was not just a room, it was a theatre of war, and it was standing room only. The air was thick with the heat of television lights and the metallic scent of adrenaline. Every local news affiliate was broadcasting live. I sat at a small table to the left, flanked by Maria and our anti-slap legal team. Across the polished wooden divide sat the enemy, Michael Garrick, looking immaculate in a $2,000 suit, led a phalanx of lawyers from Garrick and LOM. Beside him sat the CEO of Arcline Urban Works, a man whose corporate photo beamed confidently from the company's annual reports, but who now looked pale and pinched. They hadn't come alone. In the front row, they had seated two residents from Haven 12. A man and a woman who, I knew from the shelter's intake files, had been moved into subsidized apartments just 2 days prior. Mayor Vance called the emergency hearing to order, her voice brittle. We are here to review the findings of the special audit of Haven 12, initiated by the Caton Civic Trust under the Emerson Clause. Ms. Avery Flores, as the Trust's technical consultant. You may begin. I walked to the podium, my hands steady. I was not the homeless woman in the grainy photo. I was not the betrayed girlfriend. I was an architect, and this was my stage. Members of the Council, Mayor Vance, Mr. Members of the Council, Mayor Vance, Mr. Garrick, I began, my voice amplified by the microphone. We are here because of a simple fraudulent premise, that billing for one thing and installing another is a discrepancy. I am here to show you it is a business model. The first image flashed onto the giant screens behind the council. On your left, you see invoice 409B, submitted by Northline Civic Partners to the city, billing for 6,000 feet of Type A plenum-rated shielded fire alarm cable. A premium, life-saving product. I clicked. The next image appeared on your right. You see the corresponding purchase order from Northline to their supplier. They did not purchase Type A cable. They purchased 6,000 feet of Type C unshielded cable, the cheapest, thinnest wire on the market. It is not rated for this type of structure. It is, in fact, illegal to use in this application. I clicked again. A high-resolution photo filled the screen. My photo from inside the wall cavity of Haven 12. This is what is actually in the walls, the Type-C cable, already brittle and cracking. I didn't pause for their reaction. I moved to the next exhibit. This is the invoice for a full replacement of the building's main sprinkler riser valve, dated 2 years ago. The city paid in full. I clicked, and the photo of the ancient, red-tagged valve filled the screen. Is the valve that is actually in the basement. It is the original 1970s-era valve. You can cross-reference the serial number. I let the image hang in the air. The red danger tag was the only color in the frame. I moved from hardware to the human cost. Mr. Garrick and Arcline have called these value engineering decisions. I would like to show you the value. A video began to play. It was the grainy footage from my phone. It was Maria, the older woman, coughing into a tissue. Her voice, thin but clear, filled the chamber. We call it the Haven hack. Honey, everyone gets it. It's in the air. I stopped the video and put up the next slide. This is the independent lab report on the air quality in Haven 12. I'm not a doctor, so I'll just read the finding, Stachybotrys, black mold. The spore count is 500 times the acceptable federal limit. I turned to the council. They didn't just bill for a new valve, they billed for a new HVAC system. And like the valve, it was never installed. They left the old, clogged unit to aerosolize poison and pump it into the rooms of the most vulnerable people in this city. I sat down. The room was silent. Michael Garrick stood, his expression one of perfect, condescending calm. He walked to the podium as if he owned it. Thank you, Ms. Flores, he said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. That was a passionate presentation. Truly. He turned to the council. What Ms. Flores, in her zeal, has presented are minor discrepancies. Unfortunate, yes, but they are the inevitable day-to-day realities of managing a complex, aging public-private portfolio. These are not crimes. They are paperwork errors. Unfortunate lapses in oversight by a third-party subcontractor, for which Arcline, as the primary donor, is being unfairly smeared. He gestured to me. The truth is, he turned to the counsel, Ms. Flores is a disgruntled former employee, terminated for performance issues, who was found living in a city shelter. She is lashing out. There is not one shred of evidence of malicious intent. I stood up. Mr. Garrick, you're right. My evidence so far has been circumstantial. It lacks, as you say, malicious intent. So, let's fix that. I motioned to the clerk. Please project Exhibit D. A new image appeared on the screens. It was a scanned document, a handwritten list on a Northline Civic Partners memo pad, sent as an email attachment from the shelter manager, clerk, to a VP at Northline. At the top, in all caps, was the title, Damper List. For those of you who don't work in construction, I explained, a damper is a valve that controls airflow. This, however, is what the shelter manager and his contractor call their cost-burning list, a list of items to intentionally downgrade or skip to inflate the profit margin. I used a laser pointer. You'll see here, HVAC filters with the note, burn cost. Use old stock. And here, fire panel test with the note, delay inspection fee until city audit. And my personal favorite, West Wing wiring with the note, use C-type. Bill A-type per Arcline. The blood drained from the Arcline CEO's face. Garrick's smile faltered. That, I said, is malicious intent. In writing. Mayor Vance, her face pale, looked at the city attorney, who gave her a sharp, definitive nod. She turned to Garrick. Mr. Garrick, the city attorney has confirmed that the evidence of intent just presented is sufficient to invoke the full terms of the city's charter agreement, specifically the Emerson Clause. Garrick laughed. It was a sharp, ugly sound. The Emerson Clause, Mayor? Please. He turned to the press cameras, playing to the audience. This is a desperate stunt. The Emerson Clause was a 20-year provision tied to the original land bond. That bond expired 5 years ago. It is legally defunct. It is a sentimental fossil. The Caton Trust has no standing, no authority, and no right to be here. The chamber erupted in murmurs. This was the pivot. This was the moment Garrick believed he had won. Mr. Garrick is correct, the voice was Arthur's. He stood from his seat in the front row, his wool coat draped over his arm. He walked not to the podium, but to the center of the council's horseshoe desk. He was carrying a heavy leather-bound document. He placed it on the desk with a heavy, definitive thud that the microphones picked up like a gavel strike. He is correct, Arthur repeated, his voice carrying effortlessly. The primary clause is tied to the bond. He clearly did not read the addendum. He opened the heavy cover. The paper inside was thick, cream-colored, and bore the faded blue ink of a typewriter. At the bottom was a flourish of signatures. This, Mr. Garrick, is Addendum K to the original deed transfer. Not a copy, not a digital file. This is the wet-signed original, bearing my signature, and that of Mayor Thompson. And this, he tapped an embossed seal, is the original notarization, dated the same day. The press cameras went wild, the flashes strobing across Arthur's face. Maria stood up, her voice cutting through the noise. Per Addendum K, which the city attorney has already validated, upon presentation of willful and intentional malfeasance, which Ms. Flores has just provided, this council is mandated to hold this hearing and vote on a temporary transfer of possessory control of the Haven 12 parcel. The control reverts to the Caton Civic Trust for 90 days to oversee full remediation. The Arcline CEO shot to his feet. This is an ambush. This is a procedural travesty. Garrick, for the first time, looked truly panicked. We request a postponement. We demand time to review this supposed document. This is a public theft of private property. The city attorney, a calm man named Ives, leaned into his microphone. I cannot recommend a postponement, Mr. Garrick. The document is valid, and given the city's immediate and catastrophic liability, which Ms. Flores and Mr. Carter have proven, any delay is a direct conflict of interest with the city treasury. Motion to postpone is denied. Mayor Vance said, her voice like steel. As Garrick and the Arcline CEO huddled, whispering furiously, a local news camera operator, a genius of his craft, executed a slow zoom. The shot was broadcast on the live feed and thus onto the main screens in the chamber. He zoomed in on Councilman Davies, Arcline's most vocal supporter on the council. Davies was holding his phone low, texting under the desk. The high-definition camera was just sharp enough to capture the screen. Recipient, CFO Arcline. The text message, for all the city to see. He has the original. He has K. What's the play? A collective, audible gasp sucked the air out of the room. Councilman Davies looked up, saw his own panicked text message projected 20 feet high, and his face turned the color of ash. Mayor Vance slammed her gavel. Order, order in this chamber. She was livid. The betrayal was public, and it was absolute. She looked at me, her eyes flashing. Ms. Flores, do you have a closing statement? I stood. I didn't look at the council. I didn't look at the cameras. I looked directly at Michael Garrick. Mr. Garrick called my evidence minor discrepancies. He called the fraud value engineering. He called my concern for safety a PR project. He stands here even now and claims there was no malicious intent. I pointed to the main screen, where the image of my photo from the basement, the red-tagged, zip-tied, locked-out valve, remained. If you call this an oversight, I said, my voice ringing in the sudden dead silence. If you call this a paperwork error, I leaned into the microphone. Then explained to this city why that fire suppression valve was tagged out. You don't accidentally disable a building's heart. You do it on purpose. My closing statement hung in the air, an accusation that no one could refute. The council chamber descended into pure chaos. Councilman Davies, the man caught texting the Arcline CFO, was surrounded by reporters shouting, no comments. As he fled the room, Mayor Vance, her face a mask of cold fury, slammed her gavel, declared the hearing in recess, and announced the full vote on Addendum K would take place in 24 hours. The battle was not over, but the theater of war had shifted. Michael Garrick and the Arcline CEO were bundled out a side door by their legal team, their faces ashen. They had been outmaneuvered, publicly and profoundly. But Arthur knew this was just the beginning. They are cornered, he said as we walked through the throng of reporters. Now they will use their money. We have to sever the artery. That artery was the money. Harris and his team of forensic accountants, now armed with the damper list and the proof of intent, had full judicial authority to dig deeper. They didn't just look at Haven 12 anymore, they looked at the source, Northline Civic Partners. They worked through the night, fueled by coffee and a cold, professional rage. By dawn, they had it. A spiderweb of transactions that was breathtaking in its audacity. It's a classic wash, Harris explained, pointing to a flowchart on a massive whiteboard. Northline Civic Partners has received 6 major contracts from the city in the last 2 years. Not just Haven 12, but the City Hall Annex, the Crestview project I was on, even the landscaping for the mayor's public gardens. On each contract, he continued, exactly 38% of the net payment was funneled out, not to a supplier, but as a consulting fee to a non-profit organization called the Beacon Community Fund. A non-profit? I asked. A shell. We ran the incorporation papers, Harris said, his voice grim. The Beacon Community Fund has one listed officer, a man named Robert Annell. Its address is a post office box in a strip mall. Robert Annell, Maria said, looking up from her laptop, is the brother-in-law of Arcline's senior vice president, the one who signed off on the Crestview budget. There it is, Arthur said. It gets worse, Harris said. We tracked the fund's expenditures. 90% of that money, millions of dollars, was then donated in perfectly legal $500 increments to the political campaigns of Vice Councilman Davies and 3 other members of the City Council Zoning Committee. It was a perfect closed loop, Maria murmured. Arcline secured inflated city contracts, paid their brother-in-law's shell company 38%. And that shell company then used the city's own money to fund the campaigns of the politicians who approved the contracts. While they had the money trail, I was obsessed with the insurance. The city was only on the hook if they had been notified of the fraud. But Arcline's insurance, their own corporate liability, was a different beast. I pulled the public filings, the certificates of insurance Arcline had to file with the city to get their contracts. I found the Form P-17, the final certificate of occupancy and safety. It was the master document, the one that swore to the insurance carrier that all systems, fire, water, electrical, were tested and passed. Without it, the policy was void. Haven 12's P-17 was pristine. It was dated just 2 years ago, right after the supposed renovation by Northline. It had all the right signatures, or so it seemed. I looked at the signature for the city fire inspector. It was a neat, confident loop, Frank J. Hauer. But something was wrong with it. It was too perfect. It wasn't a signature, it was a graphic. I zoomed in on the PDF. The ink was uniform, with no variation in pressure. It was a digital stamp. It was forged. I found a Frank J. Hauer listed in the city's employee directory. He wasn't in the fire department. He was listed under Public Works, Sanitation, and Storage. I called the number. A man with a tired, gravelly voice answered. Hauer. Mr. Hauer. My name is Avery Flores. I'm a consultant with the Caton Trust. I'm looking at a P-17 form for Haven 12 dated 2 years ago with your signature on it. The silence on the other end was heavy. I could hear him breathing. I never signed that, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. I never signed off on that building. What happened? I asked gently. I was the inspector assigned, he stammered, clearly terrified. I went to the site. I saw the Northline specs. They were junk. They were the cheap wire. They hadn't replaced the valve. I told them I wouldn't sign. I told my supervisor the whole system was a failure waiting to happen. And nothing, he said, his voice bitter. The next day I was transferred. They told me there was a staffing emergency. They sent me to manage the city's salt domes. Salt domes for the snow plows. I've been there for 2 years. I never saw that form again. I never signed it. He went to Arthur. He told him what Hauer said. Arthur didn't call a lawyer. He called a man named George, an old friend, who is now the city's human resources director. He didn't threaten, he just asked for a favor. An hour later, Frank Hauer's HR file was on Arthur's desk. It was all there, a formal objection memo from Hauer, emailed to his supervisor, detailing the fire code violations in the Northline specifications. And the next document, timestamped 23 hours later, an emergency transfer order moving him to the Salt Domes, signed by a city manager, who sat on the board of the Beacon Community Fund. This was the conspiracy, the money, the fraud, the forgery, and the cover-up. We had it all. We were preparing the final package for the city attorney's office when a new email popped into the encrypted, anonymous inbox our legal team had set up. It was from a burner address. It contained only one sentence: "They are smarter than a shut-off valve. Check the east roof water tank. They bypass the bypass." I didn't understand. Bypass the bypass. Ben Carter, the engineer, did. "My God," he whispered. "A tagged valve is obvious. It's a legal liability. A bypass, that's something different. That's high-level sabotage. It's meant to fool an inspector." We were back on the roof of Haven 12 within an hour. This time with a full police escort, authorized by the mayor. The east roof was a gravel-strewn landscape of vents and pipes. In the corner sat a massive cylindrical wooden water tank, the old, original gravity feed for the fire system. Carter climbed the metal ladder and unlatched the heavy lid. He shone a high-powered flashlight inside. He was silent for a full 10 seconds. Then, "Avery, get up here and bring your camera." I climbed the ladder. The smell of rust and stagnant water hit me. I looked down. The tank was supposed to hold thousands of gallons of water, kept full by a high-pressure line, ready to dump into the sprinkler system the moment the alarm triggered. But the main feed pipe, a massive 12-inch cast iron duct, had been cut, just sawed clean through. The edges of the cut were new. The metal still bright beneath a dusting of rust. In its place, a small 2-inch bypass pipe, a regular domestic water pipe, the kind that feeds a sink, had been welded in. It led from the main intake around the useless tank, and directly into the sprinkler feed. "I don't understand," I said. "They didn't just shut the system off," Carter explained, his voice shaking with a rage I hadn't heard before. "They replaced it. If a fire marshal comes, he turns on a sprinkler head. And what happens? Water comes out. A trickle. It's fed by the building's regular plumbing. It meets the bare minimum test requirement, but in a real fire, this pipe," he slapped the 2-inch bypass, "couldn't put out a birthday cake. The main high-pressure line that's supposed to drench the building has been completely severed. This wasn't negligence. This wasn't fraud. This was a meticulously planned murder weapon." I took the pictures, close-ups of the fresh cuts, the shoddy welding, the tiny bypass pipe next to the gaping, severed artery of the main duct. Arthur's team leaked the photos to an independent journalist who wasn't on Arcline's payroll. By 6 p.m., the images were on every blog, every social media feed in Greyhaven. The hashtag #HavenHack was trending. The picture of the bypassed pipe, so technical, so undeniably malevolent, was even more powerful than the red tag. Arcline's response was immediate and hysterical. Their lawyers filed an emergency injunction, not against the city, but against me and the Caton Trust. They accused us of illegal trespassing, criminal vandalism, and inciting public interference with a private facility. They claimed we had cut the pipe to frame them. The injunction papers were delivered to the trust by a furious courier. Arthur took the thick legal bundle. He read the first page, and he smiled, a slow, cold, deeply satisfied smile. "It's working," he said. "They are suing us, Arthur," Maria said, looking over his shoulder. "They are accusing us of a felony." "Yes," Arthur said, tapping the page. "And in doing so, they have legally admitted in a court filing that the pipe is cut. They have admitted the system is in this condition. They are not claiming the photos are fake, they are claiming we did it. They have authenticated our single most powerful piece of evidence." The final domino fell the next morning. Mayor Dolores Vance, her political career hanging by a thread, her city facing bankruptcy from insurance fraud, and the public now in an uproar over the bypassed pipe, called a press conference on the steps of City Hall. She was a different woman. The pinched, nervous politician was gone. In her place was a prosecutor. "Yesterday," she said, her voice booming, "allegations of corporate fraud were brought before the City Council. Today, we have evidence of what I can only describe as a criminal conspiracy. The actions taken at Haven 12 are not just fraud. They are a depraved indifference to human life. If these allegations are proven true in tomorrow's vote, I will not only support the full invocation of Addendum K, I will move to cancel every single contract Arcline Urban Works and its affiliates have with the city of Greyhaven. This administration will not do business with predators. It was a declaration of war. We were back in the Trust's conference room preparing for the final vote when Maria's assistant buzzed. Ms. Flores, there are 3 gentlemen here to see you. They say they are subcontractors for North Line. They say it's urgent. I went to the lobby. 3 men stood there, twisting their work caps in their hands. They looked like they hadn't slept in days. One of them stepped forward. Ms. Flores, we saw the photos of the pipe. We were plumbers. We are electricians. We've been working for North Line for years. They've been forcing us to install junk, to sign off on fake invoices. We have the originals. We have the real shipping manifests. But if we talk, they'll destroy us. They'll blacklist us. We need protection. The dam was breaking. We took the subcontractors' statements. Our legal team, the anti-slap sharks, immediately filed for full whistleblower protection for all 3 of them. Their sworn affidavit, complete with the real shipping manifests showing Type C cable and the fake invoices billing for Type A, were filed with the city attorney's office and the court by midnight. We had the money trail, the physical sabotage, the forged inspection, the political corruption, and now the internal human testimony. It felt, for a moment, like we had won. Arcline had 1 day left, and they decided to burn the world. It started just after 2 a.m., the night before the final vote. My phone began to vibrate, not just with one notification, but with dozens. A cascade of texts from friends, from my horrified mother, from reporters, a video link. I clicked it. My stomach dropped. It was me, or rather, it was a version of me. The video was grainy, shot as if through a hidden camera in a dark, expensive restaurant. I was sitting across from a man I'd never seen before, a generic, handsome man in a suit. The audio was slightly distorted, but my voice was clear. The whole Arcline portfolio is a house of cards, my deep-faked self said, smiling, sipping from a wine glass. You're right. A little push and your company can pick up the pieces for pennies on the dollar, the man's voice replied. And you're sure you can deliver the old man, Caton? He'll back your play. He does whatever I tell him to, the fake me said with a cold laugh. He's just the checkbook. This isn't about safety. It's about getting what's mine. $2 million is the fee. Deposited offshore. Deal. The video cut to black. It was a deep fake, a clumsy one if you knew what to look for, the slight blur at my jawline, the unnatural way my eyes didn't quite sync with my words. But to a public primed by the Gazette article, a public that already believed I was a disgruntled employee, it was confirmation. I was not a whistleblower. I was a corporate mercenary, taking money from Arcline's chief rival, Zenith Development, to stage a hostile takeover. Before I could even process the technological violation. The second wave hit. The 10 o'clock local news, which had re-aired the clip, cut to a special report, and there was Damon. He sat in the studio, his face a mask of practiced sorrow. He was the picture of the wronged man. I just can't stay silent, he said, his voice thick with fake emotion. I loved Avery, but I saw her change. She became obsessed with advancement. She was ruthless. When I saw that video, he shook his head, looking directly into the camera. It explains everything. She told me, I'll do whatever it takes to get to the top. I never thought she meant this, he implied, without ever saying it. That I had traded favors. That my entire crusade was a lie. A sordid power play. They had taken my professional life. And now they were coming for my personal reputation. Using the man I had once trusted to do it. I felt like I couldn't breathe. This was Garrick's move. He couldn't win on the facts, so he was trying to assassinate my character. The phone rang in my hand. It was Arthur. His voice was not calm, it was the sound of a blast furnace door opening. I have 2 digital forensics labs, one at MIT and one in Quantico, analyzing the video's metadata right now, he said without greeting. They will confirm it's a fabrication by 4 a.m. My lawyers are already at the courthouse filing an emergency temporary restraining order against every news station that aired it, citing reckless endangerment of a protected whistleblower. He paused. They have made their final mistake, Avery. They have crossed the line from corporate malfeasance into a federal crime, wire fraud, defamation, conspiracy. The next morning, just 3 hours before the vote, Arcline played their legal trump card. A team of lawyers from Garrick and LOM filed a civil suit against me, personally, not against the trust, just me, defamation, tortious interference, and industrial espionage. The damages they were seeking were astronomical, $150 million. It was designed to be an execution. The sum was a threat, a number so large it was meant to shatter my resolve, to force me to accept a settlement, to back down and disappear forever. They were trying to bankrupt me into silence. I stared at the lawsuit, my name printed next to a 9-figure number. I felt numb. My anti-SLAPP lawyer, Chen, did not. She laughed. They are fools, she said, her voice bright. They are arrogant, old-school fools. They just handed us the gun. She held up the lawsuit. This isn't a lawsuit, it's a confession. It is a strategic lawsuit against public participation, a SLAPP suit. It is a textbook attempt to use the courts to silence a whistleblower who is speaking on a matter of public safety. They filed it after we filed for whistleblower protection and after we presented evidence to the City Council. They have just walked blindfolded into our trap. Within an hour, she filed our response. It was not a defense, it was a counterattack, an anti-SLAPP motion. The motion argued that Arcline's suit was frivolous, retaliatory, and filed in bad faith. It didn't just ask for a dismissal, it demanded that the court force Arcline, Garrick, and LOM to pay all of our legal fees, plus punitive damages. We were no longer defending, we were attacking. And then the final piece of the puzzle fell into place, from a source so perfect it felt like fate. An email leaked from an anonymous server, sent to every single member of the City Council, the Mayor's office, and the press. It was from the Arcline CFO, the one Councilman Davies had been texting. It was an email he had sent to the shelter manager. Clark, just 1 week before my inspection, the subject line was P17 inspection. The body was one sentence, keep the main valve in bypass state and the lockout tag on. The city inspector has been handled. We'll push the final approval through after the refinancing vote. It was the smoking gun, the order, the conspiracy, in writing. It proved that the cut pipe, the tagged valve, and the forged inspection were not separate failures, they were a single, coordinated, top-down strategy. The political fallout was instantaneous. Councilman Davies, his name now tied to the CFO who gave the order, had nowhere to hide. He issued a one-sentence statement. Due to an unfortunate conflict of interest, I will be recusing myself from the vote on Haven 12. One down, but Arcline still had allies, bought and paid for. Mayor Vance, however, was done. She called an emergency session 1 hour before the main vote. In light of the clear criminal conflicts of interest demonstrated by members of this council, she announced, her voice echoing with righteous fury, I am invoking my charter privilege to form a special ad hoc committee for this vote. The vote will be conducted only by the 4 members of this council, who have never accepted campaign funds from Arc Line, North Line, or the Beacon Community Fund. She had cut the head off their snake. The vote would be clean. That night, just before we left for City Hall, Arthur called me into his library. He was holding a document. It looked familiar. It was a writer, an addendum to the original deed. But it wasn't Addendum K. There is one last piece, Avery, he said. One you haven't seen. I wrote it myself. All those years ago. He slid the paper across the desk. Writer K, I read it. It was simple, elegant, and absolutely brutal. In the event that Addendum K is invoked, it read, and the council vote confirms that the property was used in a manner of charity for the purpose of self-interest, the Caton Civic Trust shall, for a period of 90 days, have the sole and binding authority to appoint the redevelopment unit and oversee the full reconstruction of the facility. I looked up at him, the words slowly sinking in. Appoint the redevelopment unit. It means, Arthur said, that if we win this vote, Arc Line is not just shut down. They are not just audited, they are fired. And for 90 days, the trust and you get to decide who rebuilds Haven 12. You get to decide how it is rebuilt, to the proper specifications, with the proper materials, with dignity. My God, it wasn't just about revenge, it was about restoration. The thesis I had written. The community library they had mocked as a PR project flashed in my mind. The open spaces, the safe materials, the natural light. I could do it. I could actually build it. We were about to leave when the CEO of Arc Line appeared on every television screen, live from his lawyer's office. He looked terrified. A man holding a bomb. It was his final, desperate move. If this council, he said, his voice pleading with the public, votes to illegally seize our property under this archaic, vindictive clause, Arc Line Urban Works will have no choice but to cease all operations at Haven 12. Effective immediately. We cannot be liable for a building we do not control. It was a threat aimed directly at the residents, a journalist shouted. But where will the residents go? That's 600 beds. The CEO just stared into the camera, his face grim. That, he said, will be on the mayor's conscience. If they cancel this contract, 600 homeless people will be on the street tonight. This is not our choice. It is theirs. It was the ultimate hostage situation. He was daring the city to make 600 people homeless just to punish him. The phone lines at City Hall began to light up. The public pressure was immense. Arthur simply looked at the screen and buttoned his jacket. He thinks he's playing his last card, he said to me. He has no idea that you're holding the ace. Arc Line's threat hung in the stunned silence of the city council chamber. 600 homeless people will be on the street tonight. It was a brilliant, brutal hostage negotiation. The press cameras zoomed in on Mayor Vance. Her face was trapped. To vote with us was to create a humanitarian crisis. To vote with Arc Line was to endorse their corruption. Michael Garrick allowed himself a small, satisfied smirk. He had checkmated the city. I did not respond to the threat. I did not raise my voice. I simply walked back to the podium. I was holding a slim, bound document. The CEO is correct, I said, my voice cutting through the rising panic. The residents of Haven 12 cannot be thrown onto the street, and they cannot spend one more night in a death trap. I looked directly at Mayor Vance. That is why we are not just here to expose a problem. We have brought the solution. Arc Line's threat is an empty one. I placed the document on the overhead projector, and the title filled the screens, Memorandum of Understanding, a 45-day emergency transition. While Arc Line was preparing its legal threats, we were preparing a continuity plan. I am presenting a fully executed Memorandum of Understanding between the Caton Civic Trust and Civic Hearth. A murmur went through the room. Civic Hearth was the anti-arc line. They were a smaller, universally respected non-profit known for running the most effective, dignified transitional housing in the state. Their books were open, and their results were legendary. This is a 45-day emergency plan, I continued, my voice firm and steady. It ensures zero disruption of service. Not one resident loses their bed. Effective immediately upon this council's vote. Civic Hearth will assume temporary operational management of Haven 12. Garrick shot to his feet. A fantasy. A meaningless piece of paper. Who pays for this? The city's funds are frozen. This is a procedural absurdity. He was shouting, but he looked panicked. He hadn't seen this coming. Arthur stood from his seat in the front row. He did not address Garrick. He spoke only to the mayor and the council. Mayor Vance, he said, his voice a calm counterpoint to Garrick's shriek. To prevent any financial burden on the city, the Caton Civic Trust is committing $4.5 million from its emergency reserve, effective tonight. This is a zero-interest bridge fund. It is not for review. It is not for study. It is earmarked specifically for the immediate emergency remediation of Haven 12. I clicked to the next slide. This $4.5 million is not a vague promise. It is tied to a specific, measurable, engineering-based schedule. The title on the screen reads, 10 items. This is the emergency plan, I said, my architect's voice taking over. Day 1, full replacement of the east roof bypass pipe, and reactivation of the main water tank. Day 2, full pressure test and certification of the entire sprinkler system. Day 3, replace all fraudulent Type C wiring with specified Type A cable. Day 4, industrial-grade mold remediation, beginning with the common areas. Day 5, installation and certification of new, compliant HVAC units. Days 6 through 10, a full overhaul and replacement of the boiler and hot water systems. I looked at the council. This is not a proposal. This is a work order. We are prepared to start tonight. The room was silent. We had not only disarmed Arcline's threat, we had presented a fully funded, actionable alternative. Garrick, seeing his advantage vanish, tried a different tack. This is a hostile takeover. The residents don't want this. They are afraid they are being used as pawns in the Keaton family's corporate games. We have residents here who will attest to Arcline's compassionate care. He motioned to the two residents in the front row, the ones his firm had planted. But before they could stand, a voice roared from the public gallery. They don't speak for us. It was the older woman I had met. Maria, the woman who told me about the Haven hack. She was standing, her hands clenched, her face furious. The mayor, seeing the political tide turn, nodded to a bailiff who handed Maria a microphone. I live there, she said, her voice shaking but powerful. I live on cot B12. I've had the cough for 6 months. My grandson's asthma. She choked for a second. Overcome. We are scared, but we are not scared of Ms. Flores. We are not scared of Civic Hearth. We are scared of you. She pointed a trembling finger directly at the Arcline CEO. We are scared of another night in your building. We are scared of a fire. We want the real repairs. We support this. Freeze them out. Fix the building. Another resident stood. Then another. The public gallery, filled with people from Haven 12, erupted. Arcline's hostages were not only refusing to be hostages, they were demanding a rescue. The momentum was a tidal wave. And then it became an avalanche. A court clerk quietly entered the chamber and handed a document not to the mayor, but to the city attorney, Mr. Ives. Ives read the document, and his face, normally impassive, went pale. He stood. Mayor Vance, members of the council, he said, his voice grave. I must interrupt. I have just been handed a sworn affidavit filed with the district court and delivered to this body. The arc line legal table tensed. The affidavit, Ives continued, is from a Mr. Mark Sandler, a senior mechanical engineer currently employed by Arcline Urban Works. The Arcline CEO looked like he had been physically struck. Ives read from the document. I, Mark Sandler, do swear under penalty of perjury that I was the senior engineer on the Haven 12 renovation 2 years ago. The HVAC system that was inspected by the city was fully compliant. I swear that I was then given a direct verbal order from my supervisor, in coordination with the CFO's office, to swap the final drawings after the city inspector had signed off. The drawings I was ordered to submit, which were used for the final as-built file, were for the substandard, non-compliant, and cheaper system. I have attached both the original, compliant blueprints and the falsified post-inspection drawings. I can no longer, in good conscience, remain silent. If the resident's testimony was the heart, this was the legal dagger. The conspiracy was no longer an allegation. It was a sworn fact from inside their own company. And then the final fatal blow. The mayor's chief of staff ran into the chamber, handing her a letter. It was not from a lawyer, it was from the city's insurance carrier, the one Arthur had warned her about. Mayor Vance read the letter. A slow, cold fury settled on her features. She stood, holding the paper. This, she said, her voice like ice, is a letter from our city's liability carrier. It was sent to my office 1 hour ago. They have reviewed the independent engineering report, the photographs of the bypassed pipe, and the affidavit from Frank Hauer. They state, and I quote, if the city of Grey Haven does not take immediate and full remedial action to bring Haven 12 into full NFPA compliance, all general liability coverage for the structure, its management, and its occupants will be terminated, effective in 48 hours. This was it, the true checkmate. Arcline's threat to walk away was now a joke. The city had to seize the building. The insurance company had just pointed a gun at the city's treasury and demanded it. Mayor Vance looked at the Arcline delegation with pure, undiluted contempt. Mr. Garrick, your client's threat to make 600 people homeless is noted, but it seems our insurance carrier and the law finds your client's continued presence to be the greater liability. The city is facing catastrophic financial exposure because of Arcline. Therefore, I am fully and unequivocally endorsing the Avery Civic Hearth proposal. It is the only viable path forward. She looked at the ad hoc committee. We will proceed to the vote. Garrick, sputtering, his face crimson, rose for one last attempt. You can't. This is a kangaroo court. It's all based on one biased report. We demand a second independent assessment. We demand a 90-day review period. The city attorney stood, cutting him off. The standard for Addendum K is willful and intentional malfeasance. The damper list email, the CFO's order to maintain the bypass, and the sworn testimony from Arcline's own engineer have established a pattern of systemic criminal fraud. This is no longer a matter of engineering opinion. It is a matter of RICO-level conspiracy. Your request for a delay is denied. We had one. That night, as the city waited for the formality of the vote, we were back at the trust. It was not celebratory, it was a mobilization. Addendum K is now in effect, Arthur said, looking at me. You have 90 days. You have the authority to appoint the redevelopment unit. No, I said. He looked at me, his eyebrow raised. We can't just appoint someone. Not even Civic Hearth. I said, we can't do what they did. We can't just hand a contract to a friend, even a good one. We have to do this in the light. Otherwise, we adjust them, but with better taste. I sat at the conference table, and for the first time in months, I felt like an architect again. I grabbed a pen. I wasn't just fixing a building. I was designing a new system. I spent 2 hours drafting the Haven 12 restoration bid package. It was simple, transparent, and public. I set the budget at $4.5 million. I listed the 10 items as the mandatory baseline, and I added the conditions that would make it mine. All material invoices and purchase orders will be made public on a city-hosted website, updated daily. All major system inspections, the fire suppression test, the HVAC certification, the boiler approval, will be live-streamed for public viewing. No more closed doors, no more red files. The press was waiting outside the trust, a sea of microphones and cameras. They were waiting for me, the woman from the shelter photo, the deepfaked mercenary, the whistleblower. What are you going to say to them? Arthur asked as I gathered my papers. I'm not going to argue with them, I said. I was tired. I was tired of the accusations, the drama, the personal attacks. I held up the 10-day, 10-item list, and the new bid package. I'm just going to give them the data, the specs, the numbers. Let Arcline argue with the facts. I walked toward the door, toward the blinding lights. Arthur put his hand on my shoulder, stopping me for a moment. Don't be afraid of the noise, Avery, he said, his voice very quiet. They are loud because they are empty. The truth, I said, the truth is loud enough. I opened the door and stepped into the light. The morning of the final vote was a siege. City Hall was a fortress of press trucks and protesters. Inside, the council chamber felt less like a legislative room and more like a high-stakes criminal trial. The special ad hoc committee, the 4 members Mayor Vance had confirmed were clean, sat at the dais, their faces grim. A judge pulled from the Superior Court was present to preside over the emergency session, a move that underscored the legal gravity of the hearing. Arcline, cornered and bleeding, came out swinging with one last, incredibly dirty trick. Just as the judge called the session to order, Michael Garrick stood, holding a stack of freshly printed documents. Your Honor, before this procedural anomaly continues, Arcline Urban Works must submit a new certified safety report. This was commissioned last night by an independent third-party inspector, and it proves unequivocally that Haven 12 is in full compliance with all city fire codes. He handed the document to the clerk, who projected the title page onto the main screens, Independent Safety Certification, Haven 12. And at the bottom, a signature, a neat, confident loop. Frank J. Hauer, City Inspector. The chamber gasped. Garrick smiled. He was claiming the man we'd built our case on, the man from the salt domes, had recanted and re-inspected the building. Our lead lawyer, Chen, stood slowly. Your Honor, this is a truly breathtaking act of contempt. This document is not just a lie, it is a felony. Mr. Garrick is attempting to submit a forged document into a federal-level public safety hearing. That's a slanderous accusation. Garrick roared. Is it? Chen asked, her voice calm. She gestured to the public gallery. Because Mr. Frank J. Hauer is sitting right there in the 3rd row. He has been under our protection since he was threatened by an Arcline affiliate 2 days ago. He has already provided a sworn affidavit that he has not been to Haven 12 in over 2 years. Frank Hauer stood up, a small man in a borrowed suit, looking terrified but resolute. I never signed that, he called out. That is not my signature. The judge's face turned to stone. He looked at Garrick. Mr. Garrick, are you aware of the penalties for submitting fraudulent evidence? He slammed his gavel. This document is stricken. It is referred to the District Attorney's Office for immediate criminal investigation. If you speak again without being addressed, I will have you removed. Garrick sat, his face pale, his smirk finally gone. I felt a hand on my arm. Maria. Avery, you need to see this. She motioned toward the chamber exit. I stepped into the echoing marble hallway. He was there. Damon. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. His expensive suit was crumpled, his eyes bloodshot. Avery, he said, his voice a hoarse whisper. He rushed toward me, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender. You have to believe me. The television interview. They edited it. They cut my words together. I never meant, I want to fix this. I want to tell the truth. I looked at this man, the one who had started my entire nightmare, now trying to jump from the sinking ship. The old, familiar sting of betrayal was gone, replaced by a cold, clear utility. He was no longer a person, he was an asset. You want to fix this? I asked, my voice flat. Yes, he said, grabbing my arm. I pulled it away. I'll do anything. I'll testify. I'll tell them about the meeting, how they offered me the promotion for your memo. I'll tell them they knew your data was accurate from day one. Not later, I said. Now? I motioned to Maria, who had followed me, her face a mask of legal disdain. Maria, Mr. Price here wants to correct the record. Maria smiled, a thin, sharp expression. Wonderful. We have a notary on standby in room 304 for exactly this purpose. She gestured to a waiting paralegal. You can give us a full sworn affidavit, Mr. Price, under penalty of perjury right now. Damon looked at my eyes, searching for the Avery he knew. She was gone. He saw only the cold resolve. He nodded, a single defeated gesture, and followed the paralegal down the hall to sign his career and his former bosses away. I returned to the chamber just as the 3 subcontractors were being sworn in. Their lawyer, now operating under the full protection of the Caton Trust, submitted their evidence. It was the kill shot to the money. We present, the lawyer said, his voice booming, the complete, unredacted bank transfer statements from Northline Civic Partners to the Shell Corporation, the Beacon Community Fund, and from the Beacon Fund to the campaign accounts of Councilman Davies, Councilman Holt, and Councilwoman Price. It was a spreadsheet of pure, undeniable corruption. The 38% flowed from the city treasury through the wash and right into the pockets of the politicians who were supposed to be our guardians. The money laundering, the bribery, was no longer a theory, it was an itemized list. The judge called the session back. Garrick, his first move a spectacular failure, was now desperate. Your Honor, this is a circus, he shouted, standing again. This is a media trial. We are being ambushed by disgruntled contractors and coerced testimony. We demand a continuance. We demand 90 days to review these outrageous financial claims. The judge leaned into his microphone, his voice cutting through Garrick's panic. Mr. Garrick, this hearing was convened under the emergency public safety provisions of the Emerson Clause. The city's insurance carrier is hours from revoking its coverage for the Haven 12 parcel. The building's primary fire suppression system is, at this moment, confirmed by 3 separate sources to be severed and inoperable. There is number 90-day review for a lit fuse. Your motion is denied. We proceed to final statements. Mayor Vance spoke first. She was not the wavering politician from a week ago, she was a woman on a warpath, a woman whose city had been threatened and whose trust had been violated. She laid out the insurance risk, the letter from the carrier stating that as of midnight, the city would be completely uninsured, financially naked to a catastrophic fire. This is not a political choice, she concluded. It is a financial necessity. We must act. The Arcline CFO, the man whose name was on the leaked bypass email, was called for his final statement. He was visibly sweating, his hands shaking. I must reiterate, there was no malice, he stammered. We admit to some minor oversights, some value engineering that was poorly communicated, but there was no intent to harm. It was a paperwork error. The city attorney, Mr. Ives, stood slowly. No malice, he asked, his voice soft. He motioned to the main screen. The CFO's own email, the one ordering the bypass, flashed into view. Mr. CFO, Ives said, is that your email address? Is that your signature? Are those your words? Keep the main valve in bypass state until the final approval. Is that no malice, sir, or is that a direct written order to willfully sabotage a life safety system? The CFO stared at his own words. Trapped, he said nothing. Mayor Vance looked at me. Ms. Flores, you have 180 seconds. The floor is yours. I walked to the podium. The cameras, the shouting, the legal arguments, it all faded. I was not looking at the press. I was not looking at Garrick. I was looking at the 4 council members on the ad hoc committee. We have spent days, I began, my voice clear and strong, talking about contracts. We have discussed bylaws, addenda, insurance policies, and financial percentages. I am an architect. I understand and respect all of those things. I paused, and my gaze hardened. But I am also the woman in the photograph. I am the woman who signed the intake log at Haven 12. I am the woman who smelled the mold and saw the dead fire alarm with my own eyes. This is not, for me, a line item on a budget. This is a building where 600 people will sleep tonight. And they will sleep under a fire suppression system that has been intentionally, systematically, and criminally severed by the very people the city paid to protect them. I leaned into the microphone, my voice dropping, but gaining intensity. I slept at Haven 12. I believe that gives me the right to demand a sprinkler system that works. I sat down. The chamber was dead silent. The 4 council members looked at each other. The debate began. 3 of them were clearly, angrily on our side. But one, a quiet, neutral woman named O'Malley, looked deeply troubled. This is a terrifying precedent, she said, her hands steepled. Seizing a private contract, giving that control to a private trust, even temporarily. It's a massive overreach. I don't, the councilman next to her, a progressive firebrand, cut her off. Sarah, they cut the pipe. They cut the fire suppression pipe. This isn't a precedent, this is an emergency response. This isn't a contract dispute. It's a crime scene. We are voting to save lives. Period. Councilwoman Ali looked at the photo of the severed pipe still projected on the screen. She looked at the CFO's email. She looked at me. Her face hardened. She gave a single, sharp nod. A reporter in the press box saw the nod. He hit send on his laptop. A second later, my phone vibrated. The breaking news alert was already live. Council sources confirm support for Avery plan. Rider K likely to be activated, giving Caton Trust 90-day control. Garrick saw the headline. The Arcline CEO saw the headline. They saw Arla's face. They knew they were beaten. Garrick stood, but all the bluster was gone. He was a deflated balloon. Your Honor, Mayor Vance, he was pleading, in the spirit of cooperation, and to avoid a protracted legal battle, Arcline proposes an immediate mediation. We will agree to a shared management structure. We will bring in Civic Hearth as a managing partner. We will maintain the brand and the continuity of care, but we will cede full technical oversight to the city. We can find a compromise. There is no need to destroy a company. There is no need. Before the mayor could even respond, Arthur, who had been silent in the front row, spoke. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the chamber like a diamond. No. Garrick turned, stunned. Mr. Keaton, there is no shared management with criminals. Mr. Garrick, Arthur said, rising to his full height. There is no partnership with men who forge inspections and poison children. You do not negotiate on public safety. You do not compromise on a severed fire hose. He looked at the mayor. Call the vote. The mayor nodded. The judge motioned to the clerk. The clerk stood. The session will now move to the final vote on Resolution 1462, to invoke Addendum K and Writer K of the Emerson Clause, to immediately terminate all city contracts with Arcline Urban Works related to Haven 12, and to grant temporary possessory control to the Caton Civic Trust for a period of 90 days. A loud, piercing electronic bell rang, the formal signal for the vote to begin. The air in the room was so tight it felt like it might snap. The 4 lights on the voting board were dark, waiting. The bell's echo died, leaving a vacuum of pure, suffocating silence. Every eye was fixed on the electronic voting board above the mayor's head. 4 dark panels representing the 4 members of the ad hoc committee. The city clerk, a woman with a steady, impassive voice, read the resolution into the official record. Her words were the hammer striking the anvil. Resolution 1462, a motion to affirm the findings of willful and intentional malfeasance at the Haven 12 parcel, to immediately and fully terminate all city permits and management contracts held by Arcline Urban Works and its affiliates related to said parcel, to approve the emergency transition of management to Civic Hearth, funded by the Caton Civic Trust, and while per the terms of Writer K of the Emerson Clause, to grant the Caton Civic Trust temporary binding 90-day possessory control with the full authority to appoint the unit of reconstruction. She finished. The silence stretched. The vote is now open, the judge said. A single red light flashed on the board. A no. My heart seized. It was Councilman Holt, a man whose district had just received a new park funded by an Arcline donation. He was going down with the ship. Then a green light. Yes. Councilwoman Ali, the neutral, the one who had been swayed by the severed pipe. A second green light. Yes, the progressive firebrand. It was 2-1. 1 vote remaining. Councilman Singh, the committee chair, had not voted. He was staring at the Arcline delegation, at Michael Garrick, who was white-knuckling the table. Singh looked at the photo of the red-tagged valve. He looked at me. The 4th light flashed green. The board read 3-4-1. Against. The judge slammed his gavel. The sound like a gunshot. Resolution 1462 passes. It was over. Michael Garrick sprang from his chair. His face a grotesque mask of purple rage. This is a travesty. A theft. This is not law, it is a coup. We will sue every member of this committee. We will sue the mayor. We will sue the Caton Trust into oblivion. We will appeal. We will, the judge's voice was like a sheet of ice. Mr. Garrick, you will sit down, or I will have you held in contempt. You cannot silence us. Garrick shrieked. I can, the judge said, his voice deadly calm. And I will. Let me remind you, counsel, that your client is already the defendant in a federal anti-SLAPP motion. Let me also remind you that the primary whistleblower in this case, Ms. Avery Flores, is under full judicial protection. Your client's deepfake video and this morning's fraudulent safety report are already in the hands of the district attorney. You are not threatening an appeal, Mr. Garrick. You are threatening a protected witness. One more word, and I will add witness intimidation to your rapidly expanding list of criminal charges. Garrick didn't sit. He froze, the blood drained from his face. He looked at his client, the Arcline CEO, who had his head in his hands. He looked at the press, all of them filming his humiliation. He turned, gathered his briefcase, and wordlessly walked out of the chamber, his legal team scrambling behind him. The spell was broken. Mayor Vance, her face set, was already signing the emergency order. She used a thick black pen, her signature a violent, decisive slash on the paper. "This order is signed and effective immediately," she announced. "The Grey Haven Police Department will secure the Haven 12 property. The Arc Line staff has 1 hour to vacate. The city's technical teams, in coordination with Civic Hearth, have full authority to enter the premises." She held up the signed order. I saw through the windows of the chamber what she had prepared. 3 massive GFD ladder trucks and 2 city engineering vans were already idling on the street, their lights flashing. They had been waiting. Mayor Vance looked at me. A reporter shoved a microphone in my face. "Ms. Flores, what's your first move? What happens now?" I stepped up to the podium. I didn't look at the cameras. I looked at the city engineer who was standing by the door, waiting for his cue. I pressed the button on the microphone. My voice was steady. It was the only sound in the room. "Start with the east roof water tank. Sever the bypass. Re-weld the main duct. I want that tank full and the system pressure tested by dawn." The engineer nodded, put his radio to his mouth, and was gone. The main doors of the council chamber were thrown open. The residents of Haven 12, who had been watching from the hallway, flooded in. They were cheering, crying. Maria, the woman with the Haven hack, pushed through the crowd and hugged me, sobbing into my shoulder. "You did it, girl. You did it. You saved us." The cameras swarmed, the flashes blinding over the heads of the crowd. I saw him, Arthur. He was standing in the back by a marble pillar, just watching. He was not smiling. He simply met my gaze across the chaotic, jubilant room and gave a single, profound nod. It was the only approval I had ever truly needed. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was an email. The sender was the claims manager from the city's insurance carrier, the man who had threatened to cut our coverage. The subject, RE Haven 12 liability. The email was one sentence. "For the council vote and the activation of the Caton Civic Hearth remediation plan, we confirm the city's liability coverage is fully reinstated and secure, effective immediately. We applaud your swift action." I looked up. The city attorney, Mr. Ives, was walking toward me. He was holding a document, a long, multi-page affidavit. "Ms. Flores," he said, handing me a copy. "Mr. Damon Price has signed his full statement. It's comprehensive. He confirms the conspiracy to steal your data, the promotion, the cover-up of the Crestview fraud. He's also testified that the CFO ordered the deepfake video made by an outside contractor." "What happens to him?" I asked. "He's the state star witness," Ives said, his face grim. "I just handed his testimony to the district attorney. They are using it as the primary evidence to secure a warrant for the arrest of Arcline's chief financial officer on charges of conspiracy, wire fraud, and public endangerment." As if on cue, the court clerk approached me, holding her own phone. "Ms. Flores, the judge asked me to inform you, the State Attorney General's office, upon reviewing our evidence packet, has just opened a full-scale criminal investigation into Arcline Urban Works and Northline Civic Partners for systemic construction fraud and racketeering." It was a total systemic collapse. We hadn't just won the vote, we had toppled the entire corrupt structure. The crowd began to thin. The press moved outside to film the fire trucks as they sped away, their sirens finally wailing. I was left standing in the sudden quiet of the great chamber, the floor littered with discarded papers. Arthur walked toward me. He was holding a thin, elegant envelope. It was on the Caton Civic Trust's heavy cream-colored letterhead. He didn't congratulate me. He didn't say, "I'm proud of you." He just handed me the envelope. "This," he said, "is your authorization per writer K." I opened it. It wasn't a letter, it was a single formal page. It was an appointment, a temporary appointment. It read, "Director of Reconstruction, Haven 12, granted full and binding authority for a period of 90 days. And at the bottom, his signature. I looked up at him, the paper in my hand. "Director," he said, "you are an architect, Avery," as if stating the most obvious fact in the world. "You found the flaw. You designed the solution. It is only logical that you should be the one to build it." The story doesn't end here. It begins. The last image I have of that time is not in the courtroom. It's later that night at 3 a.m. in the old, dusty drafting room at the trust's office, the one I had claimed as my own. My hand is steady. It's resting on a fresh sheet of vellum. In front of me are the new blueprints for Haven 12. I've already drawn the new fire suppression system, a robust, state-of-the-art grid that is redundant, testable, and foolproof. But I'm drawing something else, too. I'm erasing the tiny, grim windows of the common room. In their place, I'm drawing a massive, angled skylight, a shaft of glass and steel that will flood the main floor with natural light. The light Michael Garrick, my thesis juror, had tried to extinguish, the light they had stolen from the residents for years. I pick up my pen. The line is clean and true. Let's get to work.